Hey everyone, recently in my Elden Ring review I said that it was my new favorite game, surpassing even God of War Ragnarok, which I made a nearly 30-minute review on a while back. Both of these games were an absolute delight to indulge in, and it's very clear why these two were neck and neck for the 2022 Game of the Year award. Now you may be wondering, why am I talking about this 2 years later? Well, it's because these games are relatively new and still hold up even after all the hype has died down. Additionally, there's been a resurgence for these games with the God of War Ragnarok DLC that dropped back in December and the Elden Ring DLC that will be releasing later this year. Anywho, I thought that since I've finally been able to play both games and their popularity is coming back, why not make a video comparing them? Like I said, I really enjoyed these games, however, neither of them are perfect. Each game does something better than the other, and today we're going to explore that. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm first going to talk about the stories for both games without going too in-depth because I already did that in each game's respective review. God of War Ragnarok's story is a character-driven emotional roller coaster. It's rather linear and the game tells you what to do and where to go throughout every step of your journey as Kratos. It's filled with incredible dialogue backed by some of the best voice acting performances I've ever heard in a video game. As a result, it makes even gods seem like relatable people with relatable problems, albeit theirs are on a much larger scale. On the other hand, Elden Ring's story is about you, a Tarnished, overcoming all odds and defeating powerful enemies, demigods even, in order to collect the great runes and mend the shattered Elden Ring to restore the order in the lands between. There's a lot of incredible lore for the game, and the majority of its characters which you can experience both through the main story as well as the side content. The big difference between these two stories is that God of War is Kratos' story. He's the main character and he's the one that makes choices for himself while we just play as him. Ragnarok's story has one outcome and one outcome only, regardless of what the player chooses to do before reaching the end. It's essentially a playable movie. Whereas Elden Ring's story is your story. You are the main character. You have complete control over the choices that you make, and as a result, it has an effect on the outcome of the game's main story. It may not be a playable movie, but you have more control over the script. The only thing you can't change is the fact that you have to kill a bunch of cool characters via challenging boss fights. Now, what I will say about Elden Ring's story, and games in general where you're the silent protagonist, like every Pokemon game for example, is that it lacks any kind of emotional depth. Despite the main character literally being you, the lack of any kind of dialogue or visible emotions from your character oddly enough make you unrelatable to your own character. This is where God of War gets some points over Elden Ring because dialogue can really go a long way as seen through Ragnarok's story.
You feel their pain because that is who you are. And you must never sacrifice that. Never. Not for anyone.
On top of that, Ragnarok's story is much easier to follow because like I mentioned earlier, it's essentially just a playable movie where the player has no control over the outcome of the events. This allows even the most casual of players to have an enjoyable experience playing through the game's main story compared to Elden Ring in my opinion. However, Elden Ring more than makes up for it with the incredible lore surrounding the characters. The only problem is that you don't experience all of it through the main story. Me personally, I don't mind going to the side content for the game as well as watching a few YouTube videos to immerse myself in Elden Ring's lore, but sadly I can't say the same for others. Fact of the matter is that most people will pick up a game, play the main story, and call it a day. Then when you add the fact that it's a Souls game, the difficulty can easily turn people away once they get to a certain point in the game, but more on difficulty of both games later. As a matter of fact, looking at the Steam achievements for Elden Ring, it's shocking to see just how little of the player base have actually completed the main story. So what ends up happening is that people are either quitting the game before finishing the main story, or they finish the main story while still being confused about what just happened, like me. Hence why I went out of my way to do the side content as well as watch a bunch of videos because I was, and still am, very interested in the game. Overall, when looking at the stories for both games, I'd say that Ragnarok's has a better casual playing experience, whereas Elden Ring's is overall more interesting if you're willing to invest a lot of time into learning more about it. Thankfully, you don't need to read a bunch of grimoire cards like another game with extensive lore. Anywho, now on to the gameplay where I will once again look at combat as well as the things you do outside of combat, starting with the latter. Both games feature massive open worlds in which the player can explore to their heart's content. Besides the main story, these open worlds are filled with all kinds of stuff to do and loot to obtain. God of War Ragnarok allows players to explore 8 of the 9 Norse realms by the time you reach the end of the story, albeit some realms you can explore more than others. Within these explorable realms are activities such as side quests, boss fights, and all kinds of lore and collectibles to find. In terms of traversal, most of it is done via walking, climbing, riding dogs, rowing a boat, or swinging with your blades. You are accompanied by Mimir and either Atreus or Freya, who all offer funny and or interesting pieces of dialogue. The gameplay is very linear, and I'll admit over time it felt a little repetitive, especially when diving into combat. Now I've gone into detail about the combat in my Ragnarok review, so to sum it up, although very simplified compared to what I'm about to say about Elden Ring, the combat in God of War Ragnarok still offers a variety of ways for Kratos to take on his enemies. A good amount of the enemies in the game are pretty easy to read, and you can quickly get used to most of their parry and dodge windows. Additionally, there's useful items that can help you in combat alongside the numerous upgrades and build possibilities this game has to offer. Now, the upgrades you just unlock with XP, and they're permanently unlocked for you to use whenever. The builds on the other hand offer a bit of variety. You got your weapon handles, armor, relics, and amulet slots. Not the most customization options, especially when compared to Elden Ring, which you'll see later on, but still enough for you to play around with. The only thing I don't like is the fact that stats don't really matter in comparison to your overall level. Your level is what determines how much damage you do to enemies, which is indicated by the color of their health bar, and the general rule of thumb is just to max out whatever gear you're gonna use. With the right build, you can make even Give Me God of War look like a joke. Even some of the hardest boss fights in the game can become a cakewalk with the right build, and it usually involves using the Berserker chest armor. That aside, the combat in God of War Ragnarok is solid. Its variety is enough for players to experiment with and find something that works for them. Overall, God of War Ragnarok's gameplay, although linear and simplified at times, still offers an enjoyable experience for players that pairs well with the amazing story that PlayStation games are known for consistently delivering. Now on to Elden Ring. Oh my goodness, where do I begin with Elden Ring? Once you open the door to Limgrave, you're free to do as you please. Now, there are indicators as to where you should go and what you should do, but you don't really need to follow those. Just hop on torrent and go where your heart desires. The lands between is absolutely massive, and the main map is only part of what is available for you to explore. Since my Elden Ring review video, I have done 2 New Game Plus runs and have explored way more than I originally did. And let me say that even now, I still don't think I've explored everywhere. The attention to detail is incredible, and I like the fact that besides the main story, the game isn't linear. This can be a little confusing at times, especially when you're off to do certain quests, but more often than not, it increases the wow factor for players when they discover something new, even after multiple playthroughs. And on top of finding new places to go with a new playthrough, you can also try out a new build. What I love about Elden Ring is the endless build possibilities, which essentially makes the game infinitely replayable. At face value, there's a ton of weapons and armor to mess around with. Then you throw in talismans, ashes of war, sorceries, and incantations, as well as other tools you can add to your arsenal, and you practically have no reason to say that you're sick of using the same thing over and over. For example, in my first playthrough, I initially didn't know what kind of build I wanted to go for, but eventually I opted for the Gut Sword build. Real original, right? Then, in my New Game Plus run, I opted for dual katanas. Again, real original. After doing my best Let Me Solo Her impression, I did another New Game Plus run where I used no cheese, just 2 hammers and big balls. And honestly, that was the most fun I had playing the game despite being 2 playthroughs in already. I really wish I was recording my fight with Radagon and the Elden Beast for that one, because I beat them on the first try just jumping and swinging hammers like it's Smash Bros. Additionally, I do like the fact that your stats matter more than your actual level. Your build is centered around having certain stats, and if you know how to distribute your stats, then you don't have to worry about getting the highest level possible. I still leveled up as much as I could anyways for my New Game Plus runs, because why not? One could argue that I wasted my time because for my most recent playthrough, I literally just needed to max out strength. But
I just don't give a fuck!
Nonetheless, my point is that after beating the game twice, I still found a way to have a lot of fun, which is something I sadly can't say about Ragnarok. And that's crazy, because before playing Elden Ring, I was head over heels for Ragnarok. I guess that just goes to show that Elden Ring is just on a whole other level when it comes to what a good game should be. And honestly, looking back, the Game of the Year debate wasn't even close. The only thing I will say about Elden Ring though is that you really gotta commit a good amount of time to this game. Unlike Ragnarok, where you can pick it up, go through the story, and maybe even the Berserkers as well as Gana, and then be done with it, Elden Ring just has so much more to offer given that you have the time to experience it all. Not to mention that Elden Ring is difficult and there's no difficulty setting in the game. Personally, I like this approach because it eliminates the toxicity that comes with playing on a particular difficulty, but I can see how this would upset people that just want to sit back and enjoy the game. To be fair, Elden Ring has a lot of overpowered things that you can add to your arsenal to essentially make the game easy. I wouldn't say they're on the levels of the Berserker armor from God of War, but they make the game easy enough where even hooligans like me can beat Melania. I did it! Holy fuck, I fucking did it! Dual hammers, I beat Melania. Speaking of Melania, she is one of many incredible boss fights in this game. Like I mentioned in my Elden Ring review, the boss fights highlight the best parts of Elden Ring's gameplay, and each boss fight offers a unique challenge, all of which are satisfying once you beat them. All in all, Elden Ring provides a gameplay experience like no other, with endless build possibilities accompanied by a massive open world for you to explore. Both God of War Ragnarok and Elden Ring provide great stories and gameplay to back it up. God of War Ragnarok, although linear at times, still provides a fun and very comprehensive playing experience while also including its fair share of challenges along the way. In my opinion, it represents the best of what PlayStation games have to offer right now. Whereas Elden Ring throws you into the lands between and lets you control what you do, where you go, and by giving you so much freedom, you ultimately have control over how much fun you want to have in the game. To sum up my comparison of both games, I prefer God of War's storytelling as well as how easily enjoyable it is, but Elden Ring's overall experience is unlike any other game I've played before, which is why it remains my favorite over God of War Ragnarok. Regardless of which game you play, you will enjoy your time playing it. Both of these games are definitely worth picking up. That's going to conclude the video, but before I go, I really have to say that I cannot thank you all enough for blowing up my Elden Ring review video. I'm doing my best to read and respond to all of the comments, and I'm actually going to address some of the common things I've seen right now. First and foremost, I have more than 69 hours in Elden Ring. That was just for comedic effect, and I am nowhere near done with the game. Secondly, alongside still playing Elden Ring, I am also playing the Dark Souls trilogy, starting with Dark Souls 1. Originally, I wanted to do Sekiro next, but as I was working on my Elden Ring review, there was a Steam sale going on that included the Dark Souls trilogy. And yes, I said trilogy, which means I will play Dark Souls 2 despite the general consensus being that it's not a good game. So here's essentially a roadmap of what I'm going to be playing. As you can see, we got the Dark Souls trilogy, and in between we got Spider-Man 2's New Game Plus because I wanted to make a video on that. Then we're off to Bloodborne, followed by Demon Souls because I have those on PS5. And finally, we'll end it off with Sekiro. Afterwards, it's all Yakuza. Lastly, there were so many kind people welcoming me to the Souls community. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it, and I'm honored to finally be a part of the community. Hopefully, I can continue to make videos on these games for you to enjoy once I finish Spider-Man 2's New Game Plus, which is around the corner. Thank you all once again for watching. Please let me know what's your opinion on the whole God of War vs Elden Ring debate. If it's not already clear, my next video will be on Spider-Man 2's New Game Plus, which releases on March 7th, but let's be real here, I'll be done with it after a day or two. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one.